Anybody who wants to make sense of how American constitutional ideas were changing in the decade after independence really has to make sense of what Madison was trying to do. So he's a key actor in terms of where he's situated and what he does, but he's also a deeply innovative thinker. And making sense of his ideas is a real challenge. He was deeply empirical in his observations of politics. That's to say, deeply empirical, deeply descriptive, try to make sense of phenomena as he participated in them. But he was also deeply reflective. And you see this in a number of his key analyses where he takes the conventional wisdom and rethinks it and asks what's a better story. In many ways we have moved beyond it. You know, it's not as if all constitutional adjudication in the United States is about what did people say in 1787, 1788, or 1866 when the 14th Amendment was framed. You know, the idea that we're really bound across the board to originalist positions just does not describe, you know, how our system operates. On the other hand, the possibility that we're going to think in those terms is something we really can't escape. You know, Civil War itself is a terrible tragedy. It's great that it leads to emancipation, but hundreds of thousands of Americans die. And Reconstruction, which follows the Civil War, was a great failure. And, you know, required, you know, after Reconstruction's over, you have decades of segregation, which finally had to be undone in the 1960s and 1970s in the South. So the Civil War, I think, doesn't work very well as a source of national unification, or something that Americans find it more difficult to come to grips with. You know, the revolution ends with the Constitution, and even though, in some sense, the constitutional system failed in 1861, it wasn't really the Constitution that failed. It was the, you know, the whole basis of political agreement, pivoting on the issue of slavery. So I think in a lot of ways the Revolution and the Constitution serve as much more effective models of national unity, even though, you know, many scholars would say we should be just as invested in the Civil War. No one's ever argued that the range of ideological debate in America is anywhere near as broad or as, you know, sharply defined as it would be in, you know, many European societies. So it might be that for all the passions we embrace and all the things we disagree about, what's actually in dispute is, you know, not nearly as critical as, you know, as it might be elsewhere. And of course, the major parts of the Constitution are not controversial. I mean, but the funny thing about the Constitution, what's good for me as a historian, is that some provisions, you know, almost, I like to say, they operate as sleeper clauses, that they kind of come into operation, they become controversial, and, you know, there's room for historical as well as legal debate as to what they actually meant.